The hospital room smelled of bleach and quiet betrayal. John lay motionless under thin white sheets, his breath shallow, the beeping beside him slowing with every tick. The ceiling above was cracked, a dying man's last view. How poetic. Beside him stood no one. Not Sophia, not even the boy he'd fed, clothed, raised as his own. He remembered changing that boy's diapers while Sophia whispered on the phone with Ryan behind locked doors. He remembered skipping meals so the child could eat better. He remembered working overtime to buy a new school bag, only to hear the boy say, "Ryan bought me a better one already." He remembered everything, and in the end, none of them came to say goodbye. Until the door creaked. Sophia entered. The child stood beside her, arms crossed, face twisted in impatience. She didn't look at John with love, only duty. The boy spoke first. "Where's the bank book?" John blinked, his throat burned, his pulse flickered. He looked him straight in the eye and rasped, "Get out." Then the world went black. But darkness didn't last. The next thing John heard was the distant clatter of metal machines. The muffled voices of factory workers. His body jolted, he sat upright, heart pounding. He was no longer in a hospital bed, no IV, no beeping monitor. He was back in the factory dormitory, 2 decades younger, his calloused hands unwrinkled, no scars, no pain. Outside the dorm, the early morning bell rang. "No," he whispered. His voice was firm, whole. He scrambled to the mirror nailed above the sink. The face that stared back at him was younger, untouched by betrayal, but the eyes, they were still the same, wiser, colder. A knock at the door. "John," came the voice of the factory supervisor. "Come sign your voluntary resignation." Ah, this moment. He remembered begging last time, pleading to keep the job so Sophia wouldn't leave him. So he could stay worthy of her. But now? Now he stood, smoothed his old factory jacket, and walked to the door. The supervisor blinked. You're ready to sign?" John gave a faint, amused smile. "I've already wasted one life here, not again." He signed the paper in silence, took the layoff notice, and walked out into the gray morning. Sophia would try to look righteous. Ryan would flaunt his education and charm. And that child, he wasn't John's burden anymore. The wind blew cold as John stepped onto the factory road, but inside, his chest was warm. He didn't need to scream, didn't need to fight, he would simply walk away. And this time, he'd let them rot, together. John wasn't the kind of man people noticed. In the dim light of the factory floor, his figure blended into the machinery, sturdy, reliable, silent. He didn't talk much, didn't drink, didn't brag. While the others joked and smoked during break time, John tightened bolts and wiped grease from aging gears. The other men laughed behind his back. "Guy works like he owns the place. He's just trying to impress Sophia again. Pathetic." Everyone knew the story. Sophia, glamorous, college-educated, the only woman in town who wore pressed skirts and silk blouses to morning meetings, was John's fiancée. Technically. In practice, Sophia belonged to Ryan. Ryan had been gone for years, studying abroad on some government scholarship, but even in absence, he was untouchable. Tall, well-spoken, dazzlingly dressed even in high school. The kind of man who knew poetry, who could dance, who made women blush without trying. While John had been learning to weld pipes, Ryan had been writing Sophia love letters from Prague and Paris, and Sophia, of course, kept them all in a velvet box. Everyone in the factory had seen her read them under her desk during slow afternoons. Still, on paper, Sophia was engaged to John. Their mothers had arranged it years ago, back when John's parents were still alive, back when he still had a name people respected. But then the fire took the house, and cancer took his father, and debt took everything else. All John had left was his body and the factory that paid him by the hour. Sophia never broke off the engagement. She didn't have to. She simply treated it like a formality, a placeholder. She never lived with John. She barely acknowledged him outside of official dinners or when her mother asked. But John remembered when she used to smile at him. Back in school, before Ryan appeared, she'd run after him in the rain, giggling and tugging at his sleeve. "Don't walk so fast," she'd say. "I'm not wearing boots." John had thought, foolishly, that those moments meant something, that if he worked hard enough, stayed loyal enough, made enough money, Sophia would come back. He spent 10 years believing that. Until now. After signing his layoff papers, John didn't go home. He didn't return to the dorm or to the cafeteria where the factory hands would ask questions with smirks hidden behind concern. He walked through the alleyways instead, where red brick walls trapped the morning cold and laundry lines crisscrossed overhead like veins. Outside a corner store, Deborah stood arranging eggs into wooden crates. She worked part-time at the shop her uncle owned, Sophia's uncle too, though you wouldn't know it from how Sophia ignored her. Deborah was the cousin nobody mentioned, soft-spoken, always watching, hair tied back, hands calloused, her face always smudged with flour or ink. She saw John and paused, brushing her palms on her apron. "You're off today?" she asked quietly. "Yeah," John said. "Something like that." Deborah nodded slowly. She didn't press. She never did. "I made soup," she said. "It's still hot." John hesitated. Deborah looked away before he could answer. "It's okay if you're busy. I'll take a bowl," he said. She blinked, then gave a small smile. "I'll bring it to your place." He nodded and walked on, not saying goodbye. He didn't know then that Deborah would be the only one to check on him that week. Not Sophia, not Ryan, not even Sophia's mother. Just Deborah. By evening, the whispers had started. "They laid off John? That's odd, he was their best worker." "Must have been Sophia's doing, you know how she is about her image. They say Ryan's coming back next week." That last part was true. The factory had posted a notice on the bulletin board. New deputy planning officer, Ryan Liu. John had seen it already. He knew what would happen next. Sophia would welcome Ryan at the train station, holding a bouquet paid for with John's savings. She'd organize a dinner party in the supervisor's office. Ryan would shake hands with the men John once mentored. He'd take credit for new proposals that John had drafted in silence for years. The same floor John used to clean would now be Ryan's stage. And Sophia, she'd stand by his side, bright-eyed, proud, affectionate. John once thought that would break him, but now he just felt still, hollow. The kind of stillness that comes before transformation. That night, as John returned to the dormitory, he saw the first light flickering from the room next door. Sophia's heels clacked against the wooden corridor. She was humming, her perfume was sharp, foreign. Ryan must have arrived early. John opened his door, closed it, and locked the bolt. He looked around the room, bare walls, a chipped table, a calendar from 3 years ago. On the bottom shelf were 2 unopened dress boxes. He had bought them for Sophia. She never wore them, never even touched them. He opened one box. The dress was still pristine, sky blue silk, lace trim, fitted waist. John smiled faintly, not with sadness, with clarity. He took the dress out, folded it, and placed it into a bag. He had no more use for memories. Tomorrow, he would take it to the market and sell it. He'd use the money to buy fabric, or maybe raw materials. He remembered a trend from his past life, how fitted shirts had exploded in popularity during the spring. Demand had outpaced supply. He had been too late back then, but not this time. This time, he had foresight, and no attachments. In the room next door, laughter rang out. Sophia's voice was airy and soft, Ryan's voice was smooth and smug. John sat down, opened a blank notebook, and began to write. Numbers, margins, vendor locations, timeline predictions. His pen moved quickly, steadily. Outside his window, the factory horn blew for night shift. John didn't look up. The factory called it downsizing. A neat little term, printed in bold letters at the top of John's termination form, the kind of word meant to soften a knife before it went in. But John knew the truth. This wasn't about the factory's finances, it was about Sophia. It always had been. He stood in the supervisor's office, same gray walls, same crooked clock, same forced sympathy in the man's eyes. "You're a smart worker, John," the supervisor said, not meeting his gaze. "This wasn't my decision." John said nothing. The supervisor shifted. "We're retaining Ryan Liu. He'll be stepping into a planning role, with his education and background, you understand." John didn't answer. Because he already knew. Ryan had returned from abroad only a week ago, but Sophia had been preparing his seat for months, organizing his reference letters, whispering in boardroom corners, offering suggestions masked as strategy. The same Sophia who hadn't visited John's dorm once in the past year now handed Ryan hot lunches during his breaks. John had seen it with his own eyes, stainless steel tiffins, neatly wrapped in cloth. He was the one who had bought those containers, with his overtime pay. John reached for the pen on the desk. The supervisor hesitated. "You don't have to sign it now, John. Maybe talk to Sophia, she might." John signed. "Good luck," he said with a flat smile. "You'll need it." When he returned to his room, Sophia was waiting. She was perched on the wooden stool beside the window, legs crossed, arms folded, expression unreadable. Her hair was pulled back in a sleek twist, gold earrings, light makeup. She looked like she belonged to another world. Maybe she did. "You signed it?" she asked. John placed the paper on the desk. "I did." Her lips curved slightly. Not guilt, relief. "You're being mature," she said. "Really, John, I'm glad you're taking this like a man." He sat without answering. She watched him for a moment, then rose and walked to the window. "You know," she began softly, "things are changing, the factory's unstable, layoffs are going to continue. Ryan, he has a vision, he wants to start his own business one day, he just needs time." John's eyes flicked toward her. "And money." Sophia's smile sharpened. "Yes, and support, which I've been giving him." She turned to face him. "You always wanted to get married, right?" He waited. Her voice gentled. "If you're willing to adopt the child I'll be having, with Ryan, I'll agree to it." Silence. John blinked once. The words didn't surprise him, not anymore. He remembered this conversation from his previous life, word for word, but back then, he had said yes with trembling hands and a breaking heart. Now, he just nodded. "All right." Sophia looked mildly startled. "You're okay with that?" "Sure," he said. "Why not?" A pause. "I'll raise your lover's child. You'll marry me. And I'll even say thank you." She didn't catch the ice behind his smile. "Good," she said, stepping toward the door. "You made the right choice." That night, John sat in silence. He didn't write in his notebook. He didn't eat the cold rice Deborah had left on his windowsill. He didn't sleep. He simply watched the ceiling as voices filtered through the wall. Sophia's soft giggles. Ryan's theatrical laughter, the clinking of dishes. They thought he would play along forever. They thought he was the same man as before. But they didn't understand one thing. He had already seen the ending. And this time, he would be the one to write it. The next morning, Sophia officially moved into Ryan's apartment next door. She didn't tell John, she didn't need to. He heard the furniture being shifted, the scrape of her luggage wheels, Ryan's voice calling her name from the courtyard. "Sophia, the pillows are in the top cabinet, do you want me to fluff them for you?" John sat at his table and sipped his tea. Deborah came by with a thermos of soup and said nothing about the noise. Instead, she placed it down gently and slid a packet across the table. Inside were coupons. "Textile fair," she said. "It's still early, but I thought, maybe?" John looked up. She lowered her gaze. "I heard you've been sketching shirt designs." He didn't ask how she knew. She always knew. "Thank you," he said. Deborah smiled, small, hesitant, and left. He looked down at the coupons, factory issued, limited, the kind that made or broke inventory. Sophia would never understand how valuable these were, how everything in the market was about timing. Demand came like a wave, and if you missed it, you drowned, but if you caught it, John folded the coupons and slipped them into his jacket. 2 nights later, he packed a small bag. Just the essentials, notebooks, coupons, a few sets of clean clothes. He was heading south. No grand plan, no dramatic goodbye. Just quiet escape. He left a note on the table. "Gone for a few days, don't wait up." The next morning, the rain hissed to life beneath a cloudy dawn. John stepped on board, his fingers clutching the worn leather of his bag, his pulse beat steady. He didn't look back. Sophia found the note too late. When she walked into John's room, her old room, the place was eerily still. She touched the table, ran her fingers across the chair, then her eyes fell on the empty shelf. No coupons, no sketches, nothing. Just the faint smell of old tea leaves and something she couldn't quite name. Regret, maybe. Ryan didn't notice. He was too busy parading his promotion across the factory halls, offering compliments in broken Mandarin, hinting about overseas investments and future reforms. He had charisma, but no substance. Sophia saw it. Slowly. But by then, John had already sold out his first batch of shirts at a local trade alley 2 towns south. His pricing was modest, his stitching precise, and his knowledge of the trend curve perfectly timed. By the 3rd week, he had doubled his capital. By the end of the month, he had rented a stall of his own, and he hadn't once thought about Sophia. Night had a way of exaggerating every sound. The factory courtyard, usually quiet by sundown, became a stage after dark. Thin walls couldn't muffle laughter, and John's room shared one with Ryan's. On the other side, Sophia's voice rose and fell in soft, syrupy notes. She was always sweeter at night. "Ryan, not so much wine, there's soup on the stove." "Oh? Then come here and feed me instead." Laughter, the clink of glasses, the creak of furniture, the heavy sound of bodies moving. John sat at his table, unmoving, pen frozen mid-sentence in his ledger. The ink smudged slightly beneath his palm. He didn't bother wiping it. Instead, he closed the notebook, set his pen down, and turned toward the window. The sky was full of stars, the same sky he once wished under, the same one he'd looked at the night he gave Sophia his first bonus paycheck and told her, "Spend it on something for yourself." The next day, she bought cologne for Ryan. In his past life, he'd pretended not to notice, pretended her late nights were work trips, pretended her pregnancy was a miracle they'd welcome together. Now? Now he didn't pretend. He simply stopped caring. The dresses sat untouched for months, 2 of them, both expensive for their time, imported fabric, hand-stitched details. John had bought them when he first got promoted years ago. He'd imagined Sophia wearing them to the spring festival, maybe smiling at him under the lanterns. She never even opened the boxes. John carried them to the marketplace in silence, wrapped in brown paper, and sold them to a woman who didn't ask questions. He walked away with 50 yuan and the kind of weightless emptiness only detachment brings. Deborah knocked once the next day. He didn't answer. She pushed the door open anyway, placed a tray on the desk, 2 steamed buns, 1 boiled egg, and ginger tea in a chipped mug. "I know you won't eat properly otherwise. See?" she said, not looking at him. John didn't move, just stared at the notebook in front of him, numbers scribbled down from last week's fabric inventory. He hadn't spoken to her since he'd returned from the trade alley, but she kept showing up, always just before dusk, always without expectation. "I'm not doing this for thanks," she murmured. "I just don't want to see someone work themselves into the ground." She left before he could reply. That was the thing about Deborah. She didn't ask him to open up. She just made sure he didn't starve while he stayed shut. Ryan came by 3 days later. He strolled through the courtyard with a coffee cup in one hand, sunglasses in the other. The coffee was imported, the sunglasses fake. He leaned against John's doorway like they were old friends. "You know," he said with a smirk, "Sophia told me you used to work overtime to save up for a wedding. Admirable stuff." John looked up from his calculations, said nothing. Ryan's smirk widened. "But come on, man, you're smart enough to know you never really had a shot, right? I mean, look at you. Same jacket for 3 years, same room, same notebook. You live like a monk." He laughed. John didn't. Instead, he stood slowly, folded the cloth of his inventory ledger, and placed it on the shelf. "I live quietly," he said, voice even. "That's different." Ryan shrugged. "Call it what you want. Just don't expect Sophia to admire your aesthetic." John's mouth twitched. It might have been a smile, might have been something colder. "I don't expect anything from anyone anymore," he said. And with that, he closed the door in Ryan's face. Behind that door, his ledgers were growing. He had just completed his 3rd batch of fitted shirts, lightweight cotton, patterned collars, modern cuts, and the local shops had started calling. Word was spreading. The quiet man near the factory. His clothes fit better than the big brands. John didn't advertise, he didn't haggle, he didn't talk. He just delivered. Every yuan went back into the business. Every order sharpened his margins. Every mistake taught him a new calculation. He kept receipts in chronological order, stitched fabric samples to the back of every page, and memorized pricing trends like gospel. His hands had stopped shaking. His nights were full, but not with dreams of Sophia. With plans. Meanwhile, Sophia's laughter became less frequent. Some nights, she didn't return at all, others, she slammed cabinets. Ryan's voice grew louder, angrier. Once, John heard a crash, then silence. He didn't ask, didn't care. Not anymore. But he did keep the train schedule taped above his bed. The southbound express left every Thursday at 6:15 a.m. One ticket, third-class seat, his name reserved but unclaimed, for now. One morning, Sophia appeared at his door. Hair unkempt, face bare, no makeup, she didn't knock, just walked in. John was packing new product samples into cloth bags, preparing for a vendor meeting 2 towns over. She stood there watching him for a long time before speaking. "You haven't said anything." John folded a shirt. "About what?" "You know what." He looked up. Her eyes were tired. She looked older. The silk gloss was gone. "You're not even going to ask if I'm okay?" she snapped. John shrugged. "You're not my responsibility." That hit her harder than yelling ever could. Her breath hitched. "I just thought we were still friends." "We weren't," he said quietly. "We were a placeholder, for you, I mean." She blinked. "You don't believe I loved you?" "I believe you loved being worshipped." Silence. Then she laughed bitterly. "You think you're above us now?" John tilted his head. "No. I just think I was buried too long under you." He zipped his bag. Sophia didn't follow him out. Later that week, Deborah left a folded note with John's dinner tray. It wasn't long. "You don't have to talk, but I see you, and I hope one day you let yourself rest." He stared at the words for a long time, then placed the note inside his ledger, tucked between cash flow and stitching expenses. A small kindness, filed away, not forgotten. By month's end, he had enough saved for a bulk order. Enough inventory to set up a second stall, enough silence to drown out every noise from next door. Ryan shouted, Sophia cried, the neighbors whispered. John sold shirts, and smiled. Quietly. The midday sun was sharp, slicing through the alleyways of the factory district like a blade. John walked slowly, his steps deliberate, the dust kicking up behind his worn shoes. In his coat pocket was a red silk pouch, small, delicate, heavy with silver coins and old promises. The kind of pouch a mother gives when she seals a marriage with tradition. A pouch Sophia's mother had pressed into his hands 5 years ago, full of hope. He was returning it. Sophia's mother, Madame Lynn, lived 2 blocks east, in a sturdy courtyard home filled with rosewood furniture and fading family photographs. She had always liked John. Praised him for his steadiness, his patience, his loyalty. Too bad loyalty had nearly killed him once. She welcomed him in with surprise. John, what a nice surprise. You came to talk about the wedding, didn't you? Sophia said you've been working a lot. Poor girl, she's been planning everything alone. John didn't sit. He pulled the pouch from his pocket and placed it gently on the table. Madame Lynn's face changed. What's this? I'm here to return the engagement gift, he said, voice calm. I won't be marrying Sophia. The air dropped 10 degrees. She stared at him as if he'd suddenly started speaking another language. Is this a joke? No. Did Sophia say something? Did Ryan? It's not about them, he cut in. It's about me. I've decided not to marry her. Madame Lynn's hands trembled slightly as she touched the pouch. You've been together since you were children. We were engaged by arrangement, he said, not by choice. She sat down heavily, the chair creaking. John, you've always been family. He gave a faint smile. That's what makes this hard, but I can't do it anymore. I don't want to be someone's obligation. Madame Lynn looked at him long and hard. Her face softened, grief, not anger. I see, she said quietly. Then go, before I say something I regret. He bowed gently. Thank you. She didn't stop him. Word spread by evening. It always did in factory towns. That John had returned the silver coins, that he had ended the engagement himself, that he had walked into Sophia's house like a calm storm and left it emptier than ever before. Sophia was stunned. She found him in the courtyard just before dusk, pacing in heels she once wore only for Ryan. Her lipstick was smudged, her blouse wrinkled, and her voice shook, not with sadness, but disbelief. "How dare you go behind my back and speak to my mother?" John was sweeping dust from his porch. He didn't look up. She stormed closer. "You don't get to make decisions like that alone." He glanced at her then, just once. "But you did, over and over." Her mouth parted. You orchestrated my resignation. You moved into his house. You offered me a child that wasn't mine and called it marriage." He leaned the broom against the wall. "You don't get to pretend this is sudden." Sophia's voice cracked. "I was trying to protect you." "No," he said. "You were trying to control me." Silence. Then she laughed bitterly. "Do you think anyone will believe your version of this? You, a laid-off machinist with a bag full of shirts, versus me, the manager's daughter?" John didn't answer. He just walked past her, down the alley, coat fluttering slightly behind him. Sophia stood there, fists clenched, watching the back of the man she used to underestimate disappear, and for the first time, she felt like she'd been the one left behind. Later that night, Ryan leaned against the courtyard wall outside the factory dorms, a cigarette dangling between his fingers. The glow flickered with each drag, smoke curling in lazy spirals. A few men gathered around, sipping tea and talking in hushed tones. Ryan's voice rose above them all. "So, it's official," he said, puffing out his chest. "She's mine now. John gave her up, gift-wrapped." Someone chuckled. Another muttered, "Can't believe it." Ryan grinned wider, tossing his cigarette onto the dirt. "Told you all, Sophia was always mine. John was just the filler, someone to hold her place while I was gone." He leaned back. "Man still wearing second-hand boots and selling shirts like it's 1975. Meanwhile, I'm drawing plans with the factory directors. I've got Sophia, her house, her body, and soon, her inheritance." A shadow moved behind them. John. He stepped out from the darkness with slow, measured steps, his expression unreadable, his hands in his coat pockets. Ryan blinked, caught mid-sentence. John didn't say anything at first. He looked around, nodded politely at the other men, then locked eyes with Ryan. "You can keep her," John said softly. The words were barely louder than the wind, but they struck like thunder. Ryan opened his mouth to retort, something smug, something triumphant, but nothing came out. John walked past them all, his footsteps quiet. But no one made a sound. That night, John sat at his desk, packing the last of his orders. His second stall would open in a neighboring town by the weekend. He had just received his bulk shipment of fabric, every roll logged, measured and ready. He marked his ledger, then paused. Outside, Sophia's voice could be heard again. Only this time, it was shouting, frantic, accusing. "Don't you dare touch that! Ryan, I said stop!" A crash, a door slam. Then sobs. John closed the window. Not to ignore her, just to preserve his peace. The first crack in Ryan's image came quietly. A missed inspection deadline, a misfiled shipment report. A supplier who mysteriously refused to deliver fabric due to confusing instructions. John said nothing. But the factory corridors had long memories. "I heard he gave the vendor the wrong measurements." Didn't John used to handle that before? Back then, everything ran smooth. Ryan laughed it off at first. "They're just jealous," he told Sophia, slamming his pen on the desk. "They're comparing me to a ghost." But the ghost kept rising in whispers. Until the day Sophia snapped. It started in the courtyard. John was unloading folded shirts into a vendor cart when Sophia stormed through the gate, eyes blazing, cheeks flushed. "You," she hissed, jabbing a manicured finger in his direction. "You've been feeding rumors to the factory managers, haven't you?" John didn't even pause. He placed the last shirt in the crate, straightened, and calmly closed the lid. "You're afraid of losing what you stole," he said. "That's not my fault." Sophia's jaw tightened. "Don't act righteous. You've been lurking around, watching us, just waiting for a chance to humiliate him." John finally turned to face her, expression blank. Ryan humiliated himself. A crowd was gathering now, factory workers pretending to sort tools, a few supervisors pausing mid-step, Deborah standing just behind the vendor cart, hands folded, silent. Sophia's voice rose. You think you're clever, don't you? Turning people against him with that quiet face of yours. No one even believed in you until recently. Don't forget who tolerated your presence for 10 years. John's mouth curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. You tolerated me? He said. That's rich. You used me like a mop, silent, necessary, and disposable. Sophia's face turned red. You're a monster. John stepped closer, his voice low. No, I'm just the man you never saw. The silence was pierced by Ryan's arrival, swaggering in with his usual cocky grin. What's going on? Sophia spun. He's the one. He's been poisoning the factory against you. I told you. Ryan looked around, his eyes narrowed as he noticed the onlookers, the tension, the expressions. And then, perhaps too loudly, he said, Don't worry, baby, he's just bitter. I've got the real prize. He slid an arm around her waist, public, arrogant, dismissive. Then he looked at John. You really thought you could outshine me, wearing the same shirt every day and selling street corner clothes? Pathetic. And that's when John moved. One step forward, one slap, sharp, precise, clean. Ryan's head whipped to the side, the sound echoing across the courtyard like gunfire. Everyone froze. Ryan stumbled, holding his cheek, stunned. You hit me! John's voice was ice. That was for the years I held back. Ryan lunged forward, but someone caught him, Deborah. Her hands gripped his arm. Enough! He jerked away. Stay out of this. Deborah stood firm, voice calm, but loud enough for all to hear. You brought this on yourself, Ryan. We all saw it. You mocked him. You tore him down, and when things started falling apart, you blamed the only person who never said a word. Sophia gaped at her. What are you even talking about? You think John is innocent? Deborah turned slowly. For years I watched him bend until he nearly broke, while you pretended he was lucky to be near you. You want the truth? He was the only one in this courtyard who never pretended to be more than he was. Sophia tried to speak, but nothing came out. Ryan stood hunched, trembling with rage and embarrassment. John adjusted his sleeve and turned away. I have a train to catch. That night, he sat alone in his room. He didn't light the lamp. He didn't pack much. Just the ledgers, the supplier oak, the shirts he'd stitched with his own hands. Outside, Sophia and Ryan's voices rose again, but this time, the entire neighborhood heard them. You embarrassed me. You're the one who said I'd be factory director in a year. You told me to trust you. You were the one who made me choose. Then a crash. A door slam. And silence. John picked up his bag. The station was only a 15-minute walk, and dawn trains left early. He had already bought the ticket. Southbound, window seat. Departure, 6:15 a.m. His future didn't need a witness, only distance. Guangzhou was hotter than John remembered. The city pulsed with energy, buses groaned down sunlit roads, shopkeepers shouted their prices to passing students, and the morning air buzzed with opportunity. It smelled of engine oil and damp fabric and ambition. He thrived in it. His first stall was modest, a folding table, 3 racks, and 2 stacks of fitted collared shirts, each cut and sewn with the precision of a man who had once lived a life learning what would sell and when. The shirts sold out in 4 days. His second batch took only 2. By the time his stall moved to a storefront, he didn't even need to speak much. Word of mouth did it for him. That quiet boss who fits you better than the brands. That was his reputation. John rarely talked about the past. Not to his suppliers, not to the vendors who asked why he never drank, never bragged, never laughed too loud. He just worked, quiet, precise. Deborah wrote letters sometimes, always brief, updates on the town, mentions of who got promoted, who got married, who left. She never asked him to come back. She never asked anything at all. He always wrote back. 2 lines, sometimes 3. Business was steady. Thank you for the news, I hope you're eating well. And always, tell your mother I send my regards. 2 years passed. Then came the first letter from Sophia. It arrived with his morning inventory manifest, neatly placed, pale pink envelope, her handwriting still elegant. He opened it while sipping hot soy milk, expecting a bill or supplier change. Instead, "John, I miss you. I think about you every day. I know I didn't treat you right, but I see it now. You were the only one who ever stayed. I made mistakes. Ryan and we're not the same anymore. He's angry, he drinks. I wish I'd never let you go. Please write back. Sophia." John read it once, then folded it, dropped it into the trash can beside his desk. And then it went back to work. The second letter came 3 weeks later. This one wasn't from Sophia. It was from Deborah. "Sophia is dead. It happened 2 nights ago. The neighbors say they heard shouting. Ryan had been laid off for months, started gambling. Sophia had tried to leave. She even told her mother she was coming to see you. She never made it. He killed her in the kitchen with a butcher's knife, then jumped from the rooftop. It's all over the papers." Deborah. John didn't flinch. He didn't drop the letter, didn't curse, didn't close his eyes. He simply picked up his spoon and finished his congee. Then he answered his first supplier call of the morning. Later that day, he pulled out an envelope from the bottom drawer. Wrote a note on clean letterhead. "For the kindness I remember." And placed a stack of bills inside, several months' worth of wages. He mailed it to Madam Lynn. No return address. A month passed, then 2. Deborah's next letter was brief. They buried her without ceremony. Her mother moved away. No one mentions it anymore. John never replied. But when the fabric market sent out a notice for seasonal price hikes, he bought 2 years' worth of inventory in advance. Planning for the future. Always. 1 year later, Deborah visited Guangzhou. She didn't tell him beforehand. Just showed up at his storefront, holding an umbrella, her clothes dusty from travel. John looked up from the ledger, their eyes met. She smiled. He nodded once. "You're late." She laughed. "I missed the first train." He stepped aside, gesturing to the stool near the sewing station. "Hungry?" She nodded. They married 2 winters later. Quietly, no ceremony, no guests. Just a visit to the registration office, a shared meal, and a small silver ring. John built a second store, then a third. His business became known throughout the South for precision, discretion, and silence. No one knew about the life he once lived. He preferred it that way. On their 5th anniversary, Deborah asked him a question. They were walking by the riverbank, hands clasped loosely. "If you ever saw Sophia again, would you have forgiven her?" John didn't look at her. He just squeezed her hand gently and said, "Some people are graves. I just learned to stop visiting."